Why won't it move? What are we doing? Help me out here, Steve.
Guy needs a hive tool.
Where are we? Okay, we're back there. One more thing about, one more thing on the configuration of hives that I want to touch on too. When we're talking about Edward Sechrist, and I went back. When I put this thing together, I went back and I looked at the book. And how many people know what a jumbo is, or a modified date ant? Okay, modified date ant is an extra large, deep super, and the guys in the old days had it figured out. It's really kind of a cool thing, because when a modified date ant was designed to hold the entire brood nest intact, so that the whole thing fit in to, you got less swarming. This is why this works right here. This is why I figure it works. Now we can't, with modern beekeeping equipment, they don't make the modified data now anymore, but this configuration right here is the closest thing we can get to that setup in modern beekeeping as far as holding that brood nest. Now we're going to talk a little bit about feed here. Okay, in the outfit we probably feed well in excess of 1 million pounds a year, somewhere between 1 million and 1.5 million pounds of corn syrup a year, plus all kinds of pollen supplements as well. Yeah.
On the way you have them with the brood in the center, are you actually supering the bottom for honey and extracting that, or is that just a empty space for bees?
Which the bottom box is just an empty space for bees, kind of. What it is, what I'm looking at that is just something if they need to expand the brood. If we're running that clear brood nest correctly, and we're supering and the honey's going in the top, and we have the brood in the deep, if she needs to go down, if you run a double brood nest and you watch this, the queen a lot of times, sometimes she'll go all the way to the bottom. Most of the time she just drops down in there, that's 6 inches. Okay, so what that is that allows that queen the extra space she needs that she would get with the old modified date ant kind of idea. That gives you that extra space, so that's what we think we're seeing when we set them up like this. So anyway, we split a lot of our bees, and it takes basically 4 gallons of syrup. If you're going to split your bees and you want to do some financial planning, as it were, you got to figure on at least 4 gallons. And 4 gallons is pretty good. Will pretty much grow a beehive from a 4-frame split to something that'll produce, if you give it that much, which is quite a lot. That's close to 50 pounds of syrup. Go ahead.
Is that a 2-to-1 syrup or 1-to-1?
I think the best thing to tell you is the blend works better than either one of these alone, although there's nothing better than sucrose, straight sucrose, to stimulate bees. Sucrose got really inexpensive here the last couple of years, and of course we had to avail ourselves of that. And one of the things we found out is, and Stuart Volby and I had discussed this, and he was totally right. You got to be careful with sucrose because they don't put on much weight with it. And we fed sucrose and fed sucrose and fed sucrose, and then we went to California and everything was still light as a chip without putting some high fructose corn syrup with it. So we kind of got off that, and we're working a blend. Now, what's the ratio? Ooh, I don't know. Probably an ideal ratio would be 60-30 or 60-30 on the sucrose, less on the sucrose for dollars and cents, and the high fructose corn syrup, probably better use 55 than 42 on that as well. Now we feed 3 different ways, okay? We feed with 2-gallon pails, 5-pound rounds, that's the 5-pound round, and we use internals. And if you notice here, every one of our lids has not 1 hole, every one of our lids has 2 holes, okay? And that hole right there lines up perfectly with Mann Lake's feeder. so that we can take, if that pallet were banded on a pollination job, we can go in there and take that yellow cap out there in a gasoline style feeder under pressure and just fill that hive without ever taking the lid off it. So you know,
A deep body feeder or
pardon me?
a deep body feeder or medium?
I've got about 20,000 mediums for sale. But, you know, yeah, they're mostly mediums. They're mostly mediums right now. We're thinking about.
My point is there
yeah.
empty space there? You're leaving a frame out so you can access the feeder, or
We just put no. The frames are all in there, and the feeder sets right there on that side. So when you take that cap out, that feeder hole is right there, lined up.
in the medium?
In the medium, yeah, correct. Yeah, because of the way we've run them for years. It's, you know, my son Glenn, I got both my boys work with me on the farm, and my son Glenn, he says, you know, if we're gonna, he mentioned this, he says, you know, and Wesley told me this too, he says, you know, the brood nest, Dad, is really the way, you know, the way it's running, and we do a lot more. The reason these guys know this is that we do a lot of inspections. We inspect our bees just about every time they go to a pollination. We go to Maine, we fly 8 of our H2A guys up. We check every beehive before it goes on a pollination. So that's why these guys are a little bit in tune to where that brood nest is. But we needed that brood nest to be here and not down on the bottom, because we've decided to, in lieu of just doing pollinations, we take some of these pollination bees and we're making what we call excluder splits. We take that beehive, we'll take that. These have been resupered, okay? When they came in here, we weren't feeding them like this. This is what this yard is. It's been resupered. We took basically all of these supers off because they were full of honey. And then we took 2 frames of brood, 2 frames of food out of this deep, shook the bees off, and put an excluder in there. So we knew we were leaving the queen downstairs. We shook them and made splits. And then we supered them like this after we'd split them. So this is the end of that. But anyway, let's go to the next slide.
Your hives in a deep and a medium versus too deep, or?
Well, we're still running them too deep in Louisiana. We're still running double deeps, mostly double deeps in Louisiana. So we run them both ways. We run both ways. In Louisiana, we're running 2 deep system. This is the way we run them on that pollination group that goes north.
So have you figured out that 4 gallons, is that filling a deep and a medium, or 2 deeps from production?
No, that 4 gallons, if you go back to the single, if you go back, it takes 2 2-gallon feedings, or you can put 8 jars in them or whatever, to grow a beehive from a 4-frame split up to a production capability. Now, the reason we use 2-gallon, the reason we use 2-gallon pails in Louisiana, we got 200 locations, 96 hives each is the standard. We got 40 H2A guys, 30 to 40, depending on the season, and it's a matter of getting to them. The reason we use a 2-gallon pail is we can't get around on this jar thing fast enough to keep. The best way, this jar, if you've got time and ability to get around, that's the best way to feed a beehive right there. That 5-pound round. Just don't let them see an empty one if you want to keep building them. Go ahead. Question?
Problem with water getting in around the jar lid?
No, none. Yeah, there's no water. Yeah, see that's a G70 cap from a 5-pound. That's a 5-pound round honey jar, and that's a G70 cap, very standard cap. So that's a G70 hole, and this little guy here, that little round guy, you can get him from Mann Lake by the 1,000, and that's just something we felt we had to have. When we go to California, we feed everything 1 gallon going on the truck. And I'll share this with you. One of the reasons we do that is that old Jim Smith told Horace and I years ago, when you take bees from Louisiana and you take them to California, you're going through West Texas, Arizona, New Mexico, and of course California, the air is very dry. The bees need some water. It's really nice for them to have some water. So we use we would use a 42 corn syrup, or depending on how cold it is. 42 sometimes gets solid on you, but the idea is they get a little water for the trip if you feed them out front. And we tried it the other way last year, and we think we're going to go back to feeding them, you know, going out front. But in any case, when you're on a pollination and you don't want to cut the band and rip the lid off and do all that, which we do because why? Because we got to put pollen supplement on. I mean, we're feeding. When we go to these pollinations, once we get out of New Jersey, we go to Maine. They get 2 to 3 pounds of whatever Mann Lake's got for us. And then when they come out of that, we hit them with 2 or 3 more pounds when they go to cranberries. So they get 6 pounds of supplement on these pollinations. It seems to be helping. They got some food coming in that's definitely not contaminated. I mean, we've definitely had some issues with Maine and cranberries on fungicides really hurting the bees. We have basically taken the pollination bees and we put them all through pollination and deal with it in Western New York. And then our eastern production farm, those bees are being shipped in direct from Louisiana where they haven't had those issues. That's how important it is. And we were losing, I mean, we could take a lid off, you look right down through that beehive, you could see air on both sides after they come out of these pollinations. That beehive is not going to make you any honey, you know.
Is that syrup or water in the jars?
No, that's syrup. That's syrup.
I'm looking at this and thinking, is this pre-goldenrod bloom? I mean, you got all these feeders on, you've got your honey supers on there.
Right.
But I mean,
They're going to take that right down to the brood nest. We're going to feed these probably this one time, and they're going to Eastern Farm for, or maybe they're going to pollination, whatever. But they're not on honey production now, and there won't be any. We've tested this over and over and over again. Bees pretty much eat the feed, put it into brood production. We don't have any cross-contamination. We've checked it and checked it and checked it. We're building them, yeah, because if you don't build them, if you don't do something for them, and they can't get a consistent flow outside, you got to feed them.
You pulled a split out of these, right?
Yeah.
You pulled 2 frames of brood out, so you got to replace that.
Right.
Plus, you got to grow more bees.
Right. So yeah, that's what we're doing. We're just making sure that they don't have any, that they have everything they need to continue not lose any momentum. Question back there?
You're not using any kind of supplements in the syrup, like Honeybee Healthy or
We've tried Honeybee Healthy, yeah.
to help prevent fermentation?
We haven't had any fermentation issues with sucrose. That's a danger. But we haven't, usually they eat it so fast that they consume it so fast that we haven't. And as far as Honeybee Healthy goes, I've tried it. I don't use it all the time. Maybe I should. I don't know. You know. You know. I don't know. Should I be using it? I mean, it's more money. You know, it adds money to the equation to do it. Maybe we should be doing it. No, we're not. Yeah, no, we don't use any Clorox. People do. Friends of mine do. And David Mix is a longtime friend. I don't know if any of you know who he is or know David. David basically invented selling queens in the cells. And we're one of the things we do. I'm getting ahead of myself here, and I might not have even mentioned this except to kind of got thinking about it. Dave Mixon down there in Florida, he does use Honeybee Healthy. That's where this came from. But I think it was a decade or so ago, he calls me up and he says, I can ship you queen cells, UPS, from Florida up to New York. I said, really? So we've been doing this for about 10 years, and what we do in the fall is we put a queen cell in just about every beehive, and we get a 98% hatch rate, which is very, very good. These queens have been shipped, queen cells, which you can buy for $4, as opposed to queens, which you buy for $20. Okay, and then you put the queen in there, and they don't take well after the 1st of August up north anyway, for some reason or other. It's just like putting it's like attaching a limb. They don't take well. Whereas what happens with the queen cells is we we get a 66% success rate. Now, is it worth it? We think so. We think so. You do get some requeening, and we don't look for anything. We don't look for any queens. We just take that, all we do is we take that jar lid out, drop that cell on top of the hive, and close it back up.
You're putting in a queen right hive,
Yeah.
you're not causing a swarm in the late fall?
No, what happens when it works right, here's what happens when it works right. When it works right, the queen goes, that virgin hatches out up top there, and she runs down there and finds that old queen and kills her. And we figure it's working right about 66% of the time, which is, you know, if you're normally making splits and you're doing stuff, you're looking for 80 to 90% success rate. But we'll take the 65 because we're not looking for any queens here.
And you're just dropping that in.
They're just dropping that in.
So you're saying you get a 60% on the new queen,
Yeah, on that new queen, we figure it's about 60%, 60, yeah,
the other
50.
40, the old queen's just fine, she survives.
Yeah, she gets through. Something happens. We don't lose the beehive. You know what I'm saying? We don't lose the beehive. So anyway, I'm getting a little off. Let me keep moving here and see what happens. This here, now this is my little invention right here. It's kind of cool. That's an insulated lid. Again, I go back to Edward Lloyd Sechrist. You got to do this when you go back, when you get home and wire the computer back up and check it out. He was talking about in 1948 or 50 or so. I hope you can still hear me. This thing just fell off again. In 1948, he was studying hive temperature, okay? And you need to have 57 degrees, you need 93 degrees for brood production. So what he was doing was he was out in California and he was experimenting. He was putting a light bulb under the beehive to create a heat condition that would allow that beehive to raise brood earlier than it normally would. So what I did here was I've been working on these insulated lids, and they actually, because the reason I'm doing this, and we're thinking about doing it for everything that we think we're gonna send to California, because in central Louisiana, it's cold enough that if we can't maintain a temperature in the beehive, obviously there's less bees that we can send. We've probably got 24,000 to 26,000 live colonies right this second, and in a good year, we're lucky to send half of them. And if it gets cold, we could be down to 8,000, 9,000, take 30% right off that. Well, if you take 30% of 4,000 hives at, let's just say $200 a hive, that's a lot of money. We can afford to build more of these. What this is, I'll show you the next slide too. You see, I buy this brand new, and we can convert. We buy a lot of, John mentioned Used Pallet Company. We buy a lot of stuff from Used Pallet Company as well. But this particular lid right here, and you see this little secondary hole, and this is concrete plywood. So that's going to last better. That concrete plywood, we buy it brand new out of someplace in Georgia. But it's about, just to give you an idea, which is about $42 a sheet, somewhere in that range. And that's by the lift too, that's a lift price. And this here is what the bottom looks like. And I went a little cheap, like beekeepers do, and I got this black stuff, was 1/8 of an inch thick on the underside. And you see right here, see that little light? You can just see it. That's a 1/2 inch of Celotex in there. So this thing is an insulated lid. And right here, you can't do this without doing this. Watch this now. You see that right there? You got to vent this thing. You got to vent. Okay? It's really important because they got to be able to get that moisture out. But this insulated lid with the right size cluster, now it's not going to work with a 4-frame cluster, but if it's a cluster of bees that's capable of going out west for the California deal, this thing will help hold it. Next time I do this, I'm going to go a little bit thicker, because what we had to do, you see here, we had to drive staples through this thing because what it did was it buckled away from the Celotex, which was allowing the bees to get inside there and chew in the Celotex, none of which is good, or, God forbid, fire ants. You know, There's all kinds of things that live in the bee. Have hive beetles get in there, you know. The best thing to do is keep that as tight as you can. So the next time we do this, we're going to go with a 1/4 inch or something that's thick enough so we don't have to staple it. Next slide here will show you, okay. This is what that lid looks like. See how thick it is? See that? That's pressure treated right there. And this is Luan. That's Luan. That's an old one. That's an oldie. We moved away from Luan because it doesn't have any staying power. And of course, people have a tendency to flip lids upside down when a hive dies or there's something wrong with it. First thing you know, that Luan is toast. And the whole deal, it's fairly expensive to put this thing together. But I got to tell you that even when I have Jeff Seif over there at Hughes Pal, when he builds anything for us, any single lid that they build can be converted to that insulated deal by just dropping the insulation in there and putting the plastic on there and adding the extra rim, which is what you need to do pollen supplements. You got to have some kind of an extra rim on there. Plus, you got to make sure the moisture can escape. That's one of the most important deals is getting rid of the moisture. Okay. How am I doing here? Doing good, I think. Anyway, on time anyway. Here's some internal feeders. This is where I got the idea. These aren't Man Lakes. These are, that outfit out of California. Motherlode, plastics. These things aren't, they'd be great for you. They'd be great for anybody that wanted to try this that can stay right on it. I mean, we had too much trouble with warpage. You know, when you got 5,000 of them and, you know, they're warped and the lids are falling off and there's those issues there. This is an illustration of how we handle the jars. We put them in these fruit bins and carry them around. They're feeding some splits there. That's Louisiana. And, okay. Now, one of the things we do is we requeen every single beehive twice a year. And we can't do that without raising our own. I wouldn't want to try it anyway. So we raise our own queens, and about 40,000 cells, usable cells, a year. And we use lighter bees with varroa-resistant traits rather than the full Russian. We had some issues with trying to run I was talking to Steve last night about this. We had to move away from that because it was just a little bit too complicated for us to try to run that program, and Steve's doing a great job with it. But I looked at it and I went, oh my God, I don't think we can do this. So here, I'm going to show you some pictures real quick. You've probably seen this all before. Here we are grafting. This is Jim Pace's JZBZ's colored plastic cell cups, which work really well for if you're working with particular, we've got breeder stock, of course, I'll let you have a little secret. I mean, we're part of a program right here in Ohio Queen Breeders. We're involved pretty heavily in that project. We get a lot of our breeder stock from right here in Ohio. And they do an excellent job, by the way. Here's an incubator with about a day's worth of cells in it, or, you know, needless to say, if you're trying to do 40,000, do the math on the dates. You know, 500 cells a day is kind of when we're busy. 500 cells a day is what we got to have coming off to go into these splits, especially if we're trying to requeen both sides. Okay.
Now, what's your heat source for your incubator? You know?
I think it's they got these refrigerators, Steve, with a I think they got a refrigerator with a
Egg incubator in it?
yeah, I think that's an egg incubator is what I'm thinking is. Yeah, in the bottom there. I think that's all they're using there. Okay, here's your typical cell builders. These are starters probably here, and the finishers over there. They're coming out of the. Here's another shot of the. This is how it looks. We have two areas. Both farms in Louisiana have setups to raise queens. We kind of moved. We moved from the Bunkie farm in the spring, and then down here this is a Jennings farm, and looking at the strength level on the starters and finishers. And for those of you who do queens, and you know what I'm talking about here. And, anyway, this is They're actually spot not, I mean, I don't think that's full.
Are you running
Nice
deep
picture.
for honey production too?
Yeah, in Louisiana we do. Clearly, they're running quite a few deeps. They ran more this year because we were down a little bit on the number of colonies. We had our problem we had a problem kind of last fall and through the winter. So we were running a few less hives. Well, a few less hives. We were running 22,000 instead of 26. We made that up with our summer split. So we're back up to our normal number of hives. But what you want really is not this, but well, you want that. If you could get every single beehive to look like that, it'd be kind of cool. But basically, this is what you're shooting for, the whole bee yard to have like the 80, 90 pounds on it when you get done with extraction. Supering. Timing is everything on supering. You know, it's don't put it on. We tried. Yeah, well, in some cases, you got to put them on early. If you're us, you got to put supers on way out in front of the flow. But if you're not us and you're not trying to do that many, it's kind of cool to wait till that beehive, till that thing is just, where you rip the lid off and the bees just kind of rise to the top and it's all beautiful. That's why you keep bees. Oh man, I'm a genius. Look at this, you know. And I'll put the super on right now. Put a nice wet super on there. You know, hopefully you've treated it for nosema. You put that little wet super on, and before you even get through the yard, the bees have risen right up in the super. That is the epitome of good timing. Obviously, yeah, you know, when you want to expand and how do I expand? Well, you buy new stuff, and best thing to do though is not to put full supers of foundation on unless you really got a smoke and flow. We never do. So we always bait them a little bit. So that just tells you it'd probably be better to bait them than not.
Quick question, your foundation frames in the middle, with your bait on the outside?
No, we go every other frame.
Every other.
Yeah, and there's a reason why we do that. The reason we go every other frame, it's a good question. The reason we do that is when you put foundation in the middle like that, if you go every other frame, they have less of a tendency to do oddball stuff drawing-wise. You know, they'll put a brace in there the wrong way. You know, so it's much better to go 10 frames and confine them to that space, and then you don't get all that weird cross stuff, which you can just take out with a hive tool. This goes without saying too, you know, if you got a super with a broken rabbit, duct tape works, but don't leave it to open air. You know, leaky lid, same thing. I mean, this is just stuff I threw in there to remind people not to do. Now we're the same, we think a lot alike, John Miller and I, because I buy all my stuff pre-assembled. Only I buy one difference in this may be I use plastic frames. And the reason I use plastic frames is we have a lot of wax moth in Louisiana, a lot of wax moth danger in Louisiana. And plastic frames, I find they draw them out pretty much perfectly. I don't have any issues, and if they don't, you can just take the hive tool and rip them back down, start over again. Now this slide over here, you see this thing right here? That is an ear. That is a plastic ear. So when you break the ear off your plastic frame, you can fix it, which is the cool, you know, it really kind of justifies what we're doing here. You see this, there's the staples. We just take a upholstery staple gun. We put that plastic ear. Those plastic ears were figured out by Larry Bachado from California. Walked up to me one day and he says, "Look," he says, I was at a national meeting and he had one of these things in his hand. He goes, "You see what that is?" I said, "Yeah, I see what that is." And all you got to do, of course, if you're always breaking ears on these things, I don't care, you know.
I've noticed a terrible problem with small hive beetles with those type of frames. Do you consider the wax moth to be a bigger problem than the beetle, or?
I don't see any difference we got a lot of problems with small hive beetle, but I don't see the difference between a wood frame and a plastic frame with a small hive beetle. The small hive beetle is just, you know.
They seem to congregate in the mold reliefs on them.
Oh, in here you mean? Yeah, they probably do. They congregate in anywhere yeah.
But you don't notice that being any worse?
We don't seem to see a problem with it, no. You know, we've probably got our inventory on plastic frames is right up close to 1 million. And Fos toxin takes care of everything. Once a year anyway. 10 minutes. Okay, cool. What's that now? Fos toxin. Fos toxin. Okay, we're going to pick this up a little bit. Here's some,
Restricted use pesticide.
what's that?
It's a restricted use pesticide.
Yeah, it is. It is. You probably got to have a license to get it. I don't know if you can buy it over the shelf. I've got guys with licenses in the outfit. I don't even think about it. I don't have a license personally. My kids do. So, and Joe Sienermeyer, the guys that run the thing down there do. This is a picture of us harvesting honey in Louisiana. And you see, we use these covers mostly to keep the rain out. I mean, there's not a whole lot of robbing that goes on down there. Well, there's enough of a flow going on. We use bobcats. Down in Louisiana, we use this kind of bobcat here a lot. It's got tracks for when it's wet. It keeps us from getting stuck. That's a load of honey there back to the farm. And this is keep it simple. This is uncapping. We use Don Gunnis type uncappers because they're so simple to use. Anybody can use them, and anybody can step up there and feed that thing. Whereas some of the other ones are a little more complicated, although, you know, whatever you decide to do. This is honey processing in Louisiana, and on the right it's New York State. Basically, we have 4 Dadant 84 frame extractors, and our production in New York is typical production in New York for an 8-hour day is 20 drums, and a typical extraction for 3 to 4, depending if you have an extra guy. But 3, they'll do it with 3 to 4. These guys that we have, they're very good. Louisiana, the production's runs more like 40 barrels a day, 40 to 50 barrels a day. So every day we start up, they're just a little under they're just running just a little under a lot or a semi-load of honey. And we got to be that. If your crop is around 1 million pounds, you do the math on the days. You got to be able to get that production. We got to get that off in 8 weeks. So we got to have that kind of production. We have 2 of these facilities exactly alike, one in the Bunkie farm, one in the Jennings farm, and we have one in New York State. Our production in New York State, we're fine with that. Okay. The pictures, I'm going to show you some pictures real quick. I'm down to the pictures. That's one of the Louisiana extraction facilities. They've got the 4 pipes going into an in-floor tank where it gets pumped out. This is a mixing tank. This is an old cheese tank. That thing's probably 50, 60 years old. We'd love to have another one. I've been trying to figure out a way that I could make one. These things here, you know, this is a honey wax separator. We use this stuff in Louisiana. We really don't use it in New York because the honey runs a little bit too cold to run that. This is our New York. This is what happens in New York. We've got these coffin top milk tanks, as you can see. These guys down here on the right are bottling, and these are the tanks in New York. The coffin tops are real nice because you can lift the lid right off them and shovel the cappings out, which is kind of how we do it. We're going to have to change up.
Gravity separation in New York?
Exactly, it's all gravity. We don't pump anything. The only thing we're pumping is this. See that line up top? That's the bottling tank. That's a 1,500-gallon coffin top. So we pump into that, but the rest of it's all gravity, the whole deal. We pour barrels and pails. You see this differential right here?
Literally shoveling the cappings off of there.
Yeah, shovel the cappings off into barrels, and then we deal with it. We've outgrown the system. I've got some Cowan heater closets, and we put the barrels. We basically put the barrels of cappings. Now we dump them. We used to put the barrels inside them, but now we dump them, and 2 or 3 barrels at a time. We're way behind. We got to do something different.
Yeah, that's my
We got to do something different. The wax deal is getting, and it's worse in Louisiana. I got a guy that's coming down and picking up all our wax, taking out because we just can't. We're just on overload. We've outgrown the Cowan systems. I used them for years, but can't. These are some storage tanks in Louisiana, and this is Bunkie over here. This one right here, see this one right here? That holds 190,000 pounds of honey. And we fill it, a couple times anyway.
Is there any way to heat that, or you just have to kind of keep it moving?
Actually, there is a set of heater coils. We bought this farm from Jim Payson. I don't know if you know who Jim Payson, heard of Jim Payson, JZBZ Company. Jim Payson built that thing. And he had a heater coil in the bottom, so you can warm it if you have to. But we're usually running it so fast we don't have to. Unless a couple times we've gotten down low in the fall and it's still got 30 barrels in it and it's starting to granulate. And my son's calling me, well, it's granulating, we'll do something. I mean, a couple times we had to go in there and shovel it out. I said, don't do that again. Now, this here, real quick here, this is our filtration and drying setup. Because in Louisiana, the honey can run up to 20% moisture, and it's not honey then, it's something else. So we have to take it down a point or point and a half, 2 points, and the way because of the size of the size of the operation and what we're trying to accomplish within a given time frame, we start early. So usually the honey's a little bit wet when we start. This is a filtration system that we bought clearly as our pals over at Man Lake supplied us with these filtration tanks. There's a filter inside this tank. And more importantly, these are the dryers. These are two Dadant dryers in tandem. Now Dadant, that's the only part of that system. Dadant, I think Dadant maybe even still sells all that copper and all that stuff. We got rid of all the copper. I don't know if I've got any of that in the slides today, but this is the vacuum chamber. We got 2 of them. And we can run, if that's running right, it'll do 15, 20 drums a day, which isn't bad, you know. It's not great either. We got to try to figure out a way to do.
1 point out or 2 points?
Yeah, one, usually 1, sometimes 1.5, sometimes 2. Yeah, well, yeah, you got to do it. You know, it's just slow. Everything just goes slower, exactly. And this is, we're dumping some honey here. I think I put that in there for show. He's filling pails, okay? And hopefully I got a couple minutes left to tell you a little bit about our honey marketing. Our production was whatever it said up there at the beginning. And I only sold 2 loads of honey. Of our production, only 2 loads of honey went to one of the big 3. The big 3 are Sue Bee, Dutch Gold, and Bartman. Only 2 loads of honey went to those guys. We marketed all the rest of that honey ourselves. We got caught in back in, I don't know, 2000 or so. We were doing the same old anti-dumping dumping deal that we were doing, and we got published as a major contributor in the American Bee Journal. And of course, it was Nancy Gamber had just taken over for her brother Bill. Bill probably would have overlooked this, but Nancy didn't overlook it. And all of a sudden, I found out here, I'm sitting on my usual $250,000 pound crop back then, and Nancy goes, well, tells me about 3 or 4 months in a row, well, I'm not buying any honey today. You know, so I'm sitting here with my entire honey crop. So and no place to sell it really, because, you know, when you've been doing one thing and you can't do the one thing, what do you do? Okay, so I said to the family, I says, look, I says, let's try this. We'll go to a couple of the clubs in Massachusetts, and we'll tell them we'll sell them pails of honey for 25 cents over the prevailing barrel price, whatever that may be, up, down, whatever. It'll be 25 cents over plus the cost of the pail and a little bit for transportation. So we passed that around the clubs, and I don't know, it took us all year to sell 6 pallets, which is 36 pails to the pallet, and I'm thinking, yeah. This was back in like 2000, 2001, 2002. 2015, we sold 22 tractor trailer loads of 5-gallon pails at the old farm in Massachusetts where this all began. Back in Billerica, Mass, we sold 22 tractor trailer loads pails, most of them in small quantities. From that starting, yeah, it took a while to get it going, but that's how much of that we sell today. The market just went crazy. And then, of course, we also have what we call our jarred honey project as well. There's a guy filling a 5.5 pound round, but the good old-fashioned way, you know, on the scale. Here's some of the jarred crop. This is the New York crop here. We have a couple of distributors, and we're probably moving, I don't know, probably close to 250,000 pounds that way. So here we are with the last scene here. I'm standing here with some barrels. There's some some of the jarred honey, and loads. These are pails, loads of pails that we send up from Louisiana. We send bees back, and then those pails get shipped into Billerica as needed. So I've got through all my pictures. Does anybody have any questions? I'm just about out of time. What's that?
Perfect timing. Questions, we have some time for questions. The honey you're selling here, you're doing a filtration process.
No, it's all going. Well, it depends. This is all filtered. This has to be heated in order to be dried. This has to be heated and filtered. That's the Louisiana crop. So no, that can't. This is all sold as raw product. So there's no heat. On the Louisiana, we use let me see. Go back here real quick. There. We use these Man Lake filters right here, and it's just a filter. I don't have I should have put the picture in that shows the filter. The filters, yeah, it's just like that, yeah. And there's a pressure. You see these gauges right here? Each one of those has a gauge, and as the filter plugs up, the pressure in the gauge comes up, and that's when you tell it's time to change the filter.
Running this at 120, 130?
Higher, a little bit higher than that, because you got to get it up to. I think they're running it around under 150, but not much. I have to check with Wesley. Yeah, that's the.
But your New York stuff, you're just letting it settle it?
Yeah, it's all being sold as raw product, which is really kind of cool. If you're a beekeeper, you realize how easy that is. But it's really, it's the best way to have a value-added product. I mean, we get paid more for the raw honey than we would if we filtered it, and went into that and competed in that market, in the filtered market. We do better with the raw.
25 cents a pound over market.
On the pails. In the pails, on the raw honey in jars, we're way better than 25 cents on that, at the wholesale level. Anybody else? Go ahead.
Do you adjust the pH of your feed?
No, but maybe we should. I don't mess with it. We run it through so fast. You probably should look at that, but I don't, because we're using 1 million pounds. This stuff's coming in and out of there. When we're busy feeding, we're running a tractor-trailer load a week in and out. And we don't seem to be having issues. Maybe we should, because I know I've discussed this with Stuart back and forth, and we feel like the syrup we're buying is pretty much okay most of the time, but that's a technical issue that we should probably look at. Go ahead.
I've got two questions, I'm sorry. First of all, getting back to pH, do I actually have to test my soil, or can I look somewhere and see what the area of my pH is?
Yeah, it's not a bad idea. I mean, in general, if you look at the United States, the northern part of the United States, soils, if you live west of the Appalachians, a lot of the soil is okay. New York's all over the place, and probably Michigan is too, and maybe Ohio. But it's just something to look at. It's not a major thing, but like I said, if you go back to that map, it is somewhat major, because if you go back to that map of New York State and you look at where the bees in New York State are being kept in the summertime, and where it's green, where that's shaded green, that's sweet soil. So it must. Right in the middle, and I don't know. They've got plenty of limestone in Kentucky, but I don't know. Do they have the plant? Do you have the plants though? Do you have the plants? You need the plants. How are we doing? What's that?
How long are you staying?
I don't know. Why?
For a while after lunch?
Yeah.
People got more questions?
Yeah.
Time for lunch. Andy will be here. By the way, thank you, Andy.